Hello. We have been discussing about the Eleatic school, and we continue further to discuss about the later Eleatic school philosophers from Zeno of Elea and Melissus in today's lecture. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. The Eleatic school, as we know by now, had been founded by Parmenides, who was a crucial turning point in ancient philosophy, particularly in the development of metaphysics and logic. While Parmenides is its central figure, other Eleatic thinkers, especially Zeno of Elea, are equally significant, and each advanced or defended the doctrine of being as one, eternal and unchanging. Now, the first question is, who were the Eleatic thinkers? The Eleatic school flourished in the 5th century BCE in Elea, now in southern Italy. Its core doctrines include being is, which is being, B-E-I-N-G, is the eternal, one, indivisible and unchanging. Non-being is not, which is non-being is something which cannot be thought of or spoken about. Change and motion are illusory. Reality for the Eleatic thinkers is static and complete. Now, if we quickly have a look at the PPT as being displayed here, we see that the key Eleatic thinkers, Parmenides, has been the founder who established the doctrine of being and the denial of change. Zeno of Elea has been a student of Parmenides. He defended his teacher by developing paradoxes to refute motion and plurality. Melissus of Samos expanded Eleatic doctrines. He emphasized the infinite nature of being. So we see that Zeno of Elea has been a defender of the Eleatic doctrine, and his timeline belongs somewhere to 490 to 430 BCE. Zeno is the most famous Eleatic after Parmenides, known primarily for his paradoxes that challenge common sense notions of motion, space and plurality. He was called by Aristotle the inventor of dialectic because of his method of using logical contradictions to refute opponents. Plato refers to Zeno in the Parmenides dialogue, calling him tall and fair and about 25 years younger than Parmenides. So we see with this background of Zeno as authenticated by Aristotle in his work Parmenides, we are good to go to know, to delve, to discuss about Zeno, the Eleatic thinker. Zeno is traditionally regarded as the pupil, follower and intellectual defender of Parmenides. According to Plato, Parmenides 12:7a to 12:8e, Zeno composed his arguments to defend Parmenides' monism, the claim that only the one exists and change, motion and plurality are illusory. Now, if we look at the contribution of Zeno to the Eleatic school, we see that he had massively contributed in the defense of monism. Now, what is this defense of monism? It simply means that Zeno used dialectical arguments to show that the belief in plurality and motion leads to absurdities, thus reinforcing Parmenides' claim that being is one and unchanging. His contribution can also be seen from the invention of paradoxes. Zeno's famous paradoxes, the kills and the tortoise, the dichotomy, the arrow and the stadium, these four use reductio ad absurdum to challenge the coherence of motion and multiplicity. Further, the birth of dialectic is yet the other contribution which is often credited to Zeno, which means Zeno is sometimes called the father of dialectic because of his method of arguing by contradiction, a precursor to later Socratic and Platonic dialectics. Radical rationalism is yet the other contribution where Zeno he pushed rational thinking to its extremes, showing that sense perception is deceptive and logical reasoning must guide metaphysics. Now, if we are to comparatively distinguish between Parmenides and Zeno, we see that the philosophical method of Parmenides has been more poetic, prophetic mode, as in his work on nature in hexameter. Parmenides uses deductive reasoning to affirm being is one. Zeno, on the other hand, his methodology has been completely prose. He uses dialectic and paradox to discredit belief in motion and plurality. The focus of Parmenides has been that he asserts a positive metaphysical doctrine, which is being is and not being is not. Zeno's focus, on the other hand, is that he defends Parmenides' thesis by showing that belief in multiplicity and change leads to contradiction. Now, the tone of Parmenides has been constructive metaphysics, which is, it is necessary to say and to think that being is. The tone of Zeno had been primarily refutational. That is, if plurality exists, absurdities follow. The legacy of Parmenides can be seen in the foundation of the Eleatic metaphysics. The legacy of Zeno can be seen in the methodological innovator, foreshadowed mathematical and philosophical logic. Now, it is time to see some of the primary sources for Parmenides and Zeno, and we see that the source can be traced to Plato and Parmenides, where the type has been philosophical dialogue and the content in them has been largely the reports on the interaction between Parmenides, Zeno and the young Socrates, who offers insights into Zeno's motives and methods. The other sources of Parmenides for Parmenides and Zeno can be further traced to Aristotle's physics and metaphysics, and the type here has been philosophical critique. The content has been that refers to Zeno's paradoxes and attempts to resolve them. It describes Zeno as a key thinker against the reality of motion. Further, Simplicius, the 6th century CE, where the type has been more in the tone of Neo-Platonist commentary, the content has been one that preserves fragments of Zeno's and Parmenides' work. Example in the commentary on Aristotle's physics is yet another important source for Parmenides and Zeno. We also see Diogenes Laertius in his Lives and Opinions of Eminent Philosophers. The type has been largely biographical compendium, and the content offers anecdotes and summaries of Eleatic philosophers, describes Zeno's life and philosophical role. So, now the question is, what has been the methodology for Zeno? Zeno's methodology has outrightly been reductio ad absurdum method. Zeno's method involves assuming the opponent's view, example that motion or plurality is real. Second, show that it leads to contradiction or absurdity. Therefore, the view must be false and Parmenidean being must be true. This is known as reductio ad absurdum, a method foundational to later logic and mathematics. Now, Zeno's paradoxes is dependent on defending the one, refuting the many. Let us examine his paradoxes in categories. The first is the paradoxes of motion, which is the dichotomy paradox. Zeno says that before reaching a point, one must get halfway there. But before that halfway, there is halfway to halfway. This continues infinitely. So, motion can never start. The implication is infinite divisibility of space makes motion impossible. We also have the second paradox, which is the Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles gives the tortoise a head start. When he reaches that point, the tortoise has moved forward again, and so on. Achilles never overtakes the tortoise. The implication is relative motion involves infinite steps, which is another impossibility. The third is the arrow paradox. An arrow in flight is at rest at every moment of time. A point has no motion. So, motion is an illusion of static positions, which implies that if time is composed of discrete instants, then motion is impossible. B has been the paradoxes of plurality. If there are many things, they must be infinite in number. Between any two things, there is always another, leading to infinite regress. Secondly, if things have size, they must be both infinitely small and infinitely large. If divisible infinitely, then zero size. They don't exist. If indivisible, they must be finite and thus take up infinite space when added together. I repeat, if things have size, they must be both infinitely small and infinitely large, which means if divisible infinitely, then zero size, that is, they don't exist. If indivisible, they must be finite and thus take up infinite space when added together. What is the result? Belief in plurality leads to contradiction. So we see that the philosophical significance of Zeno's contribution and its impact can be seen from the PPT which is displayed here. The first is about the inventor of paradox. Though Zeno, his paradoxes deeply influenced logic, maths and metaphysics, is the defender of Parmenides. He reinforced the Eleatic rejection and multiplicity and motion, forerunner of dialectic. His method of reasoning was a precursor to Socratic and Platonic dialogue. Stimulated response, which is with Aristotle, Plato and later mathematicians, the impact was such that they were forced to address these paradoxes, example through the theory of limits and calculus. So then the question that further crops up is how Zeno strengthens Eleatic philosophy. While Parmenides asserts that change is illusion, Zeno proves it is logically incoherent if taken seriously. Zeno's paradoxes create a crisis of rationality which forces deeper reflection on space, time, and being. He forces us to recognize the common sense may be irrational and that true reason lies beyond appearance. So we see that Zeno of Elea is not merely a defender of Parmenides, but a philosophical giant, a philosophical innovator who introduced rigorous dialectical reasoning. Zeno laid the groundwork for conceptual analysis in logic and mathematics. He challenged the basis of perception, time, and motion. In defending the one, Zeno forced philosophy to wrestle with the limits of reason and paradox, a challenge that echoes from Plato to Einstein. Now, we must also be mindful of the bibliography of secondary sources when one reads Zeno of Elea and Eleatic school, including works of Parmenides and the development of pre-Socratic philosophy. Here is an annotated bibliographical list of the same. One can go through Professor Kirk in his work, The Pre-Socratic Philosophers. Publisher has been Cambridge University Press, 1983. And this foundational text offers a detailed account of the Eleatic school with full treatment of Zeno's paradoxes, their interpretations, and the fragments. It remains a standard scholarly reference for serious students of pre-Socratic thought. There is also this other book by Richard D. McGirahan entitled as Philosophy Before Socrates, an introduction with texts and commentary. Publisher has been Hackett Publishing House, 1994, republished in 2011, the second edition. And in this volume, which is an accessible yet rigorous introduction to pre-Socratic philosophy, including a chapter on Zeno, his paradoxes, and how they support Parmenidean metaphysics. Primary texts are included alongside commentary. One cannot forget Professor Jonathan Burns' work, The Pre-Socratic Philosophers. Routledge publication, 1979. Here, this work is highly regarded for its analytical clarity. This volume presents Zeno's paradoxes with logical precision and traces their philosophical implications into modern discussions. Burns challenges traditional interpretations and suggests new readings. We also have Patricia Card. The title of her work is The Legacy of Parmenides, Eleatic Monism and Later Pre-Socratic Thought. The publisher has been Parmenides Publishing, 2004. And this is a scholarly and in-depth study of Parmenides' monism and the defensive strategy of Zeno. Patricia Card offers an interpretative framework for understanding the Eleatic school's coherence rather than just as paradox makers. We also have Professor Richard Sorobji, and the title of his work, Time, Creation and the Continuum, published by Cornell University Press, 1983. This work is excellent, though primarily focused on ancient and medieval physics. This book offers a mathematically rigorous analysis of Zeno's paradoxes, especially in the context of space, time, and infinity. It is excellent for bridging philosophy and the foundations of metaphysics. There is also Salmon's work entitled Zeno's Paradoxes, Hackett Publishing, 2001, and this work is a modern classic. This edited volume collects essays by various philosophers and scientists, including Russell and Gonbaum, on Zeno's paradoxes of motion and infinity, their resolutions and implications for mathematics and physics. John A. Palmer's work entitled Plato's Reception of Parmenides, published by OUP 1999, is yet another interesting work. While this work focused on Plato's reaction to Eleatic thought, this work sheds light on Zeno's role in shaping Plato's dialectical style and how Zeno's method influenced Platonic logic and metaphysics. There is also the work of Harman Diels and Walter Krantz, which is entitled as The Fragments of the Pre-Socratics. It is published by Wildman, and there have been multiple editions of this work. This is originally in German Greek edition of all pre-Socratic fragments known as DK. So Zeno's works are under DK 29 and Parmenides under DK 28, an essential reference for source-based scholarship. Now that we have been talking about Zeno, we must understand that Zeno has not only just been a disciple of Parmenides in the traditional sense, but he has also been a disciple in the sense of inheriting the intellectual legacy. The only divergence between Parmenides and Zeno's methodology has been, while Parmenides is bang on and states that only being is, not being is not, and cannot be thought of, and establishes this axiom, Zeno, on the other hand, he disproves the world to prove the existence of being. So his methodology is reductio ad absurdum. And when he disproves the world, he does it by picking up the two nomenclatures, which is multiplicity and motion. Zeno says the very existence of the world is dependent on these two nomenclatures, motion and multiplicity. And Zeno goes on to show with the various paradoxes that we have had discussed how these both are writ with contradiction. For example, in multiplicity, he says that the very term multiplicity connotes anything and everything which has contradiction, which has things that are divergent from each other, and as such, it isn't consistent a concept enough. And about motion, he says that motion is nothing but a combination of rest points. So again, the nomenclature of motion, which is yet the other component on where the world exists, is writ with contradiction. Because if motion is all about a combination of rest points, then it is definitely contradictory. To elucidate this, he takes the example and says that, for instance, if one walks, say from time zone T1 to time zone T10, to complete T1 to T10, he first has to walk up to T5, which is time zone 5. Now, to walk up to time zone 5, he has to again cover half of it, which is time zone T2.5, and so on. Basically, it is infinite and it is regressive, and the movement just doesn't happen. What is happening rather is the culmination of rest points at all these temporal zones. So for Zeno, clearly, the world that we live in, which has been dependent on the concepts of motion and multiplicity, these two notions are themselves writ in contradiction, and as such, when the world is itself contradictory, it is best to take it as false. And if the world is false, what is true or what is real? It is the non-world, and that is the concept of being. So Zeno, by critiquing the existence of the world or by disproving the existence of the world, he proves the existence of the being, unlike his teacher who proves that the concept being is and can be thought of, and non-being or the concept of the world is not, it just doesn't exist and cannot even be thought of or discussed or debated or any of such verbal discussions. So we have just about studied Zeno, the other very important Eleatic philosopher, in this lecture. We will continue more with such Eleatic philosophers in our next class. Thank you so much.